That was that was some good that was some good gulping right there. A little bit closer. I'm recording. All right, cool. Fuck yeah. Look at that shit. Good composition. I like it. Hey, how's it going? My name's Jacob Palacio. This is my YouTube channel, Odd Times with Jacob. This might be your first time here. You might have been here for fucking 10 years. I don't know. But regardless, I'm here, and I'm gonna be talking about a little movie that might be of interest to you. I don't know. We'll see. But it's called the Primevals. You have either heard of this project since a very, very, very long time, or this might be your first time hearing about this project. Either way, it doesn't matter, regardless of whether you've heard it or not. But yeah, this is a really fascinating movie that I just watched for the first time very recently, and this is also a movie that's kind of like 50 years in the making or something absurd like that. But yeah, we'll get all into that when I'm ready, which is like about right now. So yeah, here we go. We'll be talking about Primevals, and if you're not fucking down for that, then just go somewhere else. I don't know what to tell you, dude. Those are gonna be the vibes for today. So yeah, let's say you're either in or you're out. So if you're fucking out, get out of here. But yeah, Primevals. So basically, it all comes down to this one little man named David Allen. David Allen is a guy who was born in like 1944. And he was a visual effects artist, special effects artist / animator. He's worked on a bunch of stuff that I'm sure you might be familiar with. Just dropped my fucking phone. But yeah, David Allen was just a dude, who grew up in the 50s and 60s with a passion for art, specifically animation and visual effects and stuff. And he's worked on a lot of notable projects that you may be familiar with, such as Mighty Joe Young, Willow, Ghostbusters 2. He was also a visual effects artist for The Howling, The Stuff, Cue the Winged Serpent, Dolls, and all 5 Puppet Master movies. He was involved in all 5 of them, actually. In fact, he was the director for the second Puppet Master movie. So yeah, he's been around. He's done some stuff for sure. So yeah, David Allen was a man with a lot of passion and a lot of ambition, maybe a little bit too much ambition. He always wanted to work on something really, really, really big, something that nobody has really quite seen before, that reaches a whole new bar, a whole new level, and again, this is back in the 60s. This was, of course, before digital effects and back when claymation and stop motion animation was in full effect. That was kind of the norm when it came to more fantastical films like fantasy or sci-fi or horror. So that was the main use of animation back in the day. Basically, David Allen and 2 other animators, who are both named Dennis Murrin and Jim Danforth, collaborated together to work on a very ambitious project in the late 1960s. The original title of the project would have been Raiders of the Stone Ring, which is a really cool title and was actually even before Raiders of the Lost Ark. So They began working on this project in 1967. This idea that they had would have been very similar to that of like Ray Harryhausen or Edgar Rice Burroughs project, something very fantastical with a lot of stop motion animation. But basically, the initial idea of this project was going to be about a group of explorers in the 1920s where they discover a land of ancient Vikings and prehistoric lizardmen, and it was supposed to be this huge, grandiose, effects-heavy, adventure blockbuster film. This really big, ambitious project that they were developing for a very, very long time, and they're trying to get it off the ground. So in an attempt to get funding for the film, these 3 stop motion animators decided to make a demo reel for the movie. Nothing too crazy, but just like a little reel, and they sent it to a bunch of people and showed it to a bunch of people just to try to get funding for the film. The project suddenly grabbed the attention of Hammer Films, which was a movie studio from the UK back in the day that made a bunch of Universal monster films in the 50s and 60s and whatnot. They were a very big company at the time, especially for, genre films such as fantasy and horror. They negotiated with the group and ultimately were interested in doing the film. Also, a little fun fact, the original film had a scene involving a pterodactyl that was fighting a zeppelin, and Hammer Films was so excited about that they even wanted to rename the entire project, I believe, Zeppelin versus Pterodactyl or something like that, which David Allen was not too keen about, so he just kind of scrapped the whole idea in general. And the final product did not end up having that scene involving that Pterodactyl versus Zeppelin, but that would have been really cool. But Hammer Films was a little too excited for it. He eventually backed out of negotiations with Hammer Films, and thus the project continued being independently funded. In the early 1970s, David Allen wrote a script for the film, the very first script that was originally going to be titled The Glacial Empire, and then later Primedorium, The Arctic World. And he co-wrote this script with a man named Mark McGee. But then in the mid-1970s, David Allen ended up writing an entire outline for the project that was now called the Primevals, and the project would be stuck with that name to this very day. In 1975, Allen began working on the script with another man who is named Randall William Cook, who was a young filmmaker at the time and who was a former artist for Disney. But yeah, the script was kind of updated and altered over the time, but in the late 1970s, they eventually would have a complete fleshed out script.
But then, all of a sudden,
there was a special effects artist who goes by the name of Steve Neal, who was working on the 1978 low-budget sci-fi film Laser Blast, produced and directed by Charles Band of Full Moon Pictures, who would end up showing the promo reel of the Primevals to Charles Band, and Charles Band was pretty impressed, to say the least, and he was interested in helping finally get it off the ground. So David Allen would eventually work with Charles Band after pitching, the Primevals to him, and Charles Band was impressed and wanted to move on with the project. However, still struggled to find money for the project due to its, ambitious nature. But the sci-fi world was fucking hyped for the Primevals, despite there being nothing really made about the movie yet, just by word of mouth and from the little promo reel that the guys have made. The story of the Primevals would eventually go on to be on one of the 1978 covers for the fantasy magazine Cine Fantastique, I'm gonna assume is what it is. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool cover, and some old geezers are saying like how they remember, this cover being a huge deal way back in the day of like, this new big giant motion picture coming out called the Primevals, and it looks so cool. It was, supposed to be the next big thing. This is around the time when the first Star Wars movie came out, so this was, a big deal, and the idea of the modern blockbuster was still fresh, and this was, to be the pioneer of, those said films. So yeah, the Primevals was a huge deal back in the day, all thanks to the Cine Fantastique magazine as well, which, by the way, that very same issue that featured the Primevals on the cover would go on to talk about very popular films in that very same issue, such as Alien and Dawn of the Dead, among others, so that if this film would have been released at the time of those movies, then this movie would have been huge. However, the project would eventually stall once again after only being a few months in pre-production, mostly, again, just because, they couldn't find money for the film. In the early 1980s, it did find a new production home under Band's Empire Pictures, but Allen would still, try to get money for it, independently for himself. But yeah, David Allen was desperate. He even went as far as to take out a full-page ad in a Variety magazine in the 1980s. He just wanted to get the project's name out there, to get word of mouth out there, so he can finally, earn enough funding to create the project that he's always been wanting to make. The project was eventually revised once again when Charles Band started his new production company in the late 1980s called Full Moon Pictures. Oh yes, these are the guys who are in charge of, Evil Bong, The Ginger Dead Man, the Puppet Master films, all of the really bad, low-budget, schlocky horror films with heavy practical effects that you've seen, sitting in your Blockbuster, walking past a horror aisle when you were a little kid that gave you nightmares when you're just looking at the cover. But still, the Primevals was still considered to be one of the most ambitious projects, even for Full Moon Features, which was Charles Band's, eventually his biggest production company. And the film has even said to cost several $1 million, which was a lot of money for, a very small film studio like this.
Hey, what's going on? Jacob Palacio here. Sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted to talk about today's sponsor, which is actually Movie Pallete. If you guys haven't heard of these things, which I'm sure you have by now, I mean, come on. These things are really cool canvas paintings that are a collage of just all types of different movies in the world. It's created by a team of very talented people who take the most common color of every scene in a movie, and then they put it in chronological order from left to right, and the result is just a beautiful canvas painting with, a mirage of beautiful colors, and yeah, it just looks really neat. It looks great in a bedroom, it looks great in a living room, shit, put it in a bathroom, who fucking cares? People can look at movie palettes while taking a dump, and then they'll be like, wow, this looks great, I want to get a movie palette. And what's even better is you can get these movie palettes for 15% off if you use the code JACOB15 at checkout on moviepalette.com, where they have such a huge variety of selections and movies that you can choose from. It's huge. But yeah, bada bing, bada boom, there you go, that's a movie palette. Alright, back to you, Jacob, sorry.
But finally, in 1994, in 1994, almost 20 years after this whole thing has been in development, they started principal photography for the film The Primevals, and it was to be shot in Romania and a little bit in Italy for a 10 to 12 week period in the summer of 1994. So finally, they had enough movie. They were reaching a point where they were getting enough money to finally start making the project, which was huge. It was a huge step up for the project. After 1994, filming wrapped, and David Allen worked really hard on the post-production aspect of the film, which was to take also a very long time, considering that he wanted to use a lot of stop motion effects and animation, which was all to be, mostly done through him, with some people helping him out, of course, I would imagine, but, this is all pretty much done through him. This is his passion project. So Allen continuously worked his heart out on this project pretty much up until 1999. While bouncing back and forth between other projects that he was working on in the late 90s, he managed to complete about 10% of the animation. There was still a long ways to go, but David Allen was getting ever so closer to getting this thing off the ground. That is until, unfortunately, in 1999, David Allen would ultimately meet his demise and pass away. Allen was diagnosed with which was a type of cancer, and he did struggle with that while also animating, the scenes for the film, and unfortunately he passed away and was not able to see, the final result of his project, and pretty much died thinking that this thing would have never seen the light of day. Around this time as well, it is important to note that at this point in time, in the 90s, stop motion was slowly beginning to be replaced with digital effects and computer effects due to popular films like Jurassic Park, which came out a year before The Primevals was being filmed, and that movie obviously had a bunch of computer effects, which was groundbreaking at the time, and Hollywood to this day has been changed because of that film, and among other films that were using digital effects, other big Hollywood productions, it was slowly becoming the new norm. So it just wasn't looking too good for The Primevals, unfortunately, and Full Moon Features was still struggling to find, financing for the film. Eventually, the project had to be shelved because of the use of, practical stop motion effects that was slowly becoming more and more dated, and the lack of money and resources that they were getting for the project. It was just proven to be way too ambitious to finish, so it just wasn't looking good for The Primevals, and for the longest time, this was considered to be one of the most popular Lost films ever made. However, there is one guy who came in and just decided to save everyone and save the world and save everything, and that man's name is Chris Endicott. Chris Endicott was a colleague of David Allen, basically before Allen's death, because, he knew he was going to die eventually. He left all of the film elements, storyboards, stop-motion puppets, and pretty much all of the equipment in the care of Chris Endicott. So basically, everything was in this guy's hands to finally get this fucking movie made. So years and years and years have passed, and Chris and Charles Band are still trying to come up with ways to get this project, completed. All right, now we're going to jump forward quite a bit here. In 2018, Charles Band would eventually start an Indiegogo fundraiser to finally complete the long-lost film, The Primevals. Basically, before David's untimely death, he would be undergoing chemotherapy while trying to complete the film, sometimes even completing like a few frames a day, just to do anything to try to get this thing even closer to being finished. And Chris Endicott, who was being mentored by David Allen at the time, who was doing a lot of the animation work for The Primevals, David left a plea to his will and basically said that, bear in mind that probably any release of the film is better than none, though I would like to see it presented as close as possible to the original intention. So through storyboards and, the stop motion creations that David Allen created, the project remained true to David Allen's original vision. Thanks to the Indiegogo fundraiser, they managed to raise up to $40,000 to complete the film. And after over another 20 years, they finally started working on The Primevals once again. Chris Endicott got a tiny little crew of visual effects artists, among some other, friends of David Allen and people who I'm sure were mentored by David Allen, to get together to finally get this thing off the ground and get it done. Fast forward to 2023, which at the time of recording this video was only about 2 years ago, the film was complete. it was done. They finished it. And the film was set to have its world premiere at Fantasia Fest in 2023, where people would finally be able to see the Primevals. The same month, it was supposed to be premiering at Fantasia Fest. The Full Moon Features would eventually release a trailer on YouTube for the film, and it was the very first complete full trailer for the Primevals. And then finally, fast forward to March 11th, 2024, which was just under a year ago, the film was released theatrically in theaters. So yeah, it happened. And not only that, but as of right now, on this day in 2025, the film is streaming on Shudder and AMC Plus, so you can watch it on those streaming services. It is available to watch right now, and I think that's just a fucking beautiful thing considering how long and how painful this project must have been to make. And yeah, I thought the story of this movie was so fascinating, and to see something that was filmed all the way back in 1994 that was released, in 2024, just 30 years later, it's a trip to see. It's pretty fucking crazy if you think about it. Like, I remember watching it. It's looking like something that was filmed in the 90s, and yet it's being released today. It just would not have been able to happen without, the help of everyone involved. And it's just a beautiful thing, to be honest with you. And I think David Allen, if he was alive today, he would have been fucking pretty ecstatic to see his project that he's worked his entire life on, that he unfortunately never got to see, complete. But yeah, the Primevals, it's such a crazy, unique experience, because you have all these live action scenes that were shot in 1994, but then you have all this stop motion work that, 90% of it was done, just a few years ago in the 2020s. And obviously stop motion has changed so much over the years. People have done so much ambitious things with stop motion, and it's improved in a lot of ways over the years. To see, just the blend of the old with the new mixed together, it just kind of makes the film feel so unreal. And yeah, it's overall just makes for a really fascinating watch. But what is this new Primevals movie about, and how different is it from the very, very early, renditions of the project back, in the 60s and 70s when they were still working on it, back when it was called Raiders of the Lost Ring or Stone Ring, something like that. I already forget what it's called, but it's really cool. Well, this new film that you can watch on Shudder takes place deep in the Himalayas. Deep in the Himalayas, a group of Sherpas kill a gigantic Yeti. In fact, they're so convinced that the creature that they killed is the, legendary Yeti that Dr. Claire Collier organizes an expedition with her former student, Matt Connor, and hunter, Rondo Montana, fucking awesome name, whoever came up with that, among others, to search for more of the specimen of this so-called Yeti. But what awaits them is something that none of them would have ever imagined. However, when they reach the Himalayas to find these Yetis, they find themselves held captive by an ancient race of alien creatures. And yeah, that pretty much sums it up. It's pretty cool. It's a very neat little story. Reminded me a lot of like The Land of the Lost, particularly the 1970s show. Just the overall vibe and feel of the whole thing reminded me a lot of that, which was really cool. And again, very old school, very nostalgic, and very cool to see something like that being released in this day and age. You never see anything like this released nowadays, and it's just so cool to see something like this as fresh and original as it is. The acting is really bad, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's pretty bad all around. However, I think it's perfect for this, for this type of film. Like, there's some fun characters, don't get me wrong, but the acting itself is kind of like soap opera level pretty bad. But again, I think it works for the film. Like, it's okay. It's not a detriment to the entire project by any means. It's like, oh man, it sucks that they worked fucking 50 years on this project, but just the acting had to be shitty, like it's not that bad. It's definitely something to take into account, looking at this through a very objective lens. But the stop motion creature effects themselves, fucking beautiful. I thought that was easily the neatest part about this film. It's just so cool to see it all complete and full and together. And is this the exact thing that David Allen envisioned? Probably not. That probably would have been pretty hard to capture, especially, considering all the resources that they used and stuff. I imagine it was not exactly what he envisioned, but it's pretty damn close. It definitely just feels like you're going through a time machine watching this movie, just, through all the stop motion effects and, the filming being taken place in the 90s, and just the overall idea of the film being conceived in, as early as the late 60s. It's just an overall really crazy story, and a pretty crazy fucking movie that I think is well worth watching if you have the time. And yeah, there's just a lot to say about it. It's a pretty fucking cool little thing that I wanted to share with you guys. But yeah, Primevals overall for me is gonna probably, if I had to rate the film, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's really neat, and again, it's really cool to see just this surge of these movies that were decades in the making, you know, these long lost passion projects that are now finally getting to see the light of day due to all these like fundraising campaigns and from all these fans and loved ones and people who, you know, who want to see these projects and these stories come to life. Another example being Phil Tippett's Mad God, which was also a super crazy, ambitious project that was conceived by Phil Tippett, who did, you know, effects work for films like Jurassic Park and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and RoboCop, and it was decades in the making, and, you know, he had so much trouble throughout all the years getting funding for the film, and it finally saw the light of day. And you can actually also watch that movie on Shudder as well. Shudder seems to be, you know, the king of all these really obscure passion projects from all these old dudes, you know, trying to get these things off the ground all their lives. But yeah, it's really just cool to see that, you know, and it's cool to see them finally come to see the light of day, and the fact that you can watch it and it's complete, you know, just it must be such a relief off of all the people who have worked so long on this thing. And, you know, it's just really cool to see. And I just thought, you know, I should bring it out there to the world and let you guys know about it, because it's a pretty cool, neat little story. So, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about it. I don't really have much else to add, so I'm gonna probably stop the video right now because I'm tired of talking. I've been talking for over an hour now. I'm going fucking crazy. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please stay tuned for more videos coming soon in the very near future. My name's Jacob Pallete, by the way, all times for Jacob. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you again very soon. Yeah, all right, cool. Bye-bye. Take care. Toodles.